Today I'll show you how I put together some modular walls that are great for sight blocking and blocking off passageways. So we're going to be using this green foam. I got this at Lowe's. It's project board foam. It's an inch wide, and I cut these to be about 2 inches tall, and we're going to trim them a little bit. It's going to be cut down the middle, and they're going to be roughly ½ an inch thick. Now sometimes you get a good cut and the piece is 2 ½ inch sections, but in this case it was just 1 ½ inch section, so I'm going to make about 10 of these. Now the sections that got trimmed off I'm going to slim down as well. These are going to be cut into a ½ centimeter in width, so 5 millimeters. So the ½ inch sections are going to be for our inner wall, and the 5 millimeter sections are going to be an outer wall archway when we're done with them. Now I want to cut 2 of these archway sections for each of the inner walls, and given that the sizes are being trimmed down just a little bit, the overall width of the wall sections when they're done are going to be just under 1 inch. Okay, so let's go ahead and make the inner wall. So I've got a bunch of the inner wall sections that have been cut here. Each one of these is roughly ½ an inch thick. I also made some 2-inch sections and some 1-inch sections just to have some variance. The 1-inch sections are going to end up being pillars, and the 2-inch sections are going to be just slightly smaller walls. This will add a little bit of variance and a little bit of extra modularity for gameplay. Now, each of these are going to be done roughly the same. We're going to start by scribing out a simple brick pattern. I'm just going to use the grid on my mat here and scribe in a line every ¼ inch. It's going to give me a fairly repeatable brick pattern that's going to look fairly nice. Now, once I've got that scribed in, I'm going to mark a brick at the bottom every ½ inch. And then using that as a guide, I'm just going to continue that pattern, and then on every other line I'm going to just do a slight offset so that we have a noticeable brick grout line. There we go. Now once I've got the entire wall kind of lined out, I'm just going to use my texture plate here to add a little bit of extra texture, just some indentations and some appearance of stonework. And then just to make sure I didn't lose any definition from the grout lines, I'm going to retrace everything with a ballpoint pen. This will make the lines a little bit larger and just kind of help to maintain all of the appearance of brickwork. And that's going to do it for the inner walls. I'll do the 2-inch and 1-inch sections off camera, and now we can start working on our outer walls. So I want each of these to be as close to the same as possible, so I'm going to start off by making a simple little traceable jig with a little bit of this chipboard here. Now this is just going to be a simple process of marking out a line and then kind of trimming it into the chipboard. But I want this to kind of wrap around the foam, so I added this little lip here, and that's just cutting a little bit into the chipboard so that it bends but doesn't cut all the way through. Now on the 2 far sides of the archway, I want it to be roughly a ½ inch, just to kind of give the appearance of a pillar on either side of the wall. So I'm just going to mark that out, and then I'm going to mark a ¼ inch down from where the top of the archway would be. And that gives us this little pattern here. And now you can kind of use any round surface to do this. I'm just going to use this little tin that I've got here and mark out a simple little archway. Now if you don't want to do an arch, you can do like a simple line to kind of have a little bit more angular look. Maybe you're going for a dwarven theme and you want something a little bit more strongly angled to do that. But either way, once you've got everything marked out and you know where all your pieces are going to go, grab a sharp knife or utility knife, or in this case an X-Acto knife, and very carefully cut all of your sections so that you can remove the inner section of the wall, and you've got a nice simple little archway. There we go, and that'll wrap around our foam, and we can bring it over to our hot wire table. Now the chipboard is too dense for the hot wire to damage it or cut through it, so it makes a really nice guide for laying on top of some foam and then just kind of guiding the wire around to cut out the shape that you'd like. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now I need to do this 19 more times. Once I had those all cut out, it's time to add in our brick pattern to the outer wall sections. And this is fairly much the same as the inner wall sections. There's just a little bit of a gap in between some of the scribed lines. Now you do want to be a little careful. This foam is fairly durable, but it is still foam. So if you cut a little too deeply, you might end up running into some issues where the foam kind of breaks apart as you're working with it. If that happens, you can try and piece it back together with a little bit of glue, or you can work with the fragments and then glue them into place so that it looks like there's just a little bit of battle damage or something like that. Once I've got my lines scribed in, I'm just going to trace them out with a pencil to exaggerate the lines, make them a bit more noticeable, same as we did with the inner wall. Then using my X-Acto knife, I'm just going to scribe in all of the edges just to make sure that that brick pattern continues around and just kind of wraps around the piece. Now these sections of the wall, you only need to scribe in the brick on one side, since we're going to be gluing one side onto the inner wall. Alright, so now that we've got everything built, we can start attaching things together. Now using just a little bit of hot glue, I'm going to carefully place these onto the inner wall. And that'll give us this really nice three-dimensional wall pattern. We've got that kind of grout and brick line kind of continuing throughout the entirety of the piece. Kind of gives the appearance that there was a section of flat wall, and then some more bricks were kind of laid up around it to create the archway. Now this is a little bit top heavy, so I'm going to take a piece of a craft stick and glue it to the bottom. This will give a little bit of reinforcement to the base, but also add a lot of weight to make it a little less top heavy and keep it from tipping over during gameplay. Now I cut some of these pieces of foam to be little slabs. These are roughly a 1/8 of an inch thick. There's really no set depth that you make these slabs to. I just made a bunch of them off camera, and I'm just going to alternate a simple little pattern across the top just to disguise the seam for the top of the wall. Now you can get as creative as you'd like with the pattern on the top. I just opted for something a little simple just to kind of speed along the crafting process. If I did these again in the future, I might go with like a herringbone pattern or something a little bit more ornate. Once the main pieces are down, I cut a few of these slabs in half and then stuck them into place just to continue the pattern and finish everything out. Now, in terms of the sizing of everything, if you wanted, you could put one of these walls down and still have it be a playable area. In this case, every 3 slabs is roughly 1 inch. So I could still use this as a recognizable grid for models to stand on top of or walk across. Alright, so that is everything crafted together. We're just going to make sure that all of the slabs have that same kind of indented line on the top of them. And then I'll press them down onto the texture plate just to kind of indent a little bit of texture. And here we go with a 4-inch wall section, a 2-inch wall section, and a 1-inch pillar. Alright, so now that they've all been built, it's time to ooh paint. So first thing I'm going to do is seal everything in with a 50-50 mix of some black acrylic paint and some Mod Podge. Now, if you do like I did and batch a whole bunch of these together, I made 10 of the 4-inch walls, 8 of the 2-inch walls, and 4 pillars, it's going to take you quite a lot of time to paint everything together. Make sure you're doing it in a ventilated space so that you don't get headaches or inhale glue that much. Once that was dry, I went over everything with a overbrushing of some Artist Loft Gray just to give it that nice deep baseline of stone coloration. Now when you're doing stuff like this, always remember the paint that you put on will kind of be toned by the paint underneath it. So if you use a light paint followed by gray, it'll be brighter. Dark paint followed by gray, it'll be darker. Now to add a little bit of highlight, I'm going to go over everything with a dry brushing of neutral gray. This will just kind of pick out the raised areas and highlight some of the stone texture. Now, I want this to kind of match in with the sewer system that we've been working on, so I'm going to do a light dry brushing of some raw sienna just to kind of give it a grimy, dirty appearance. Once that was dry, I went back over everything with another highlight and dry brush of neutral gray just to reacquire some of the raised edges and highlights. Now you'll still be able to see the raw sienna through the neutral gray, so you still have that kind of grimy appearance, but it doesn't look quite as pronounced. And then I did a final edge highlight, very light dry brush with some warm gray from Master's Touch. This is just going to give it a little bit more of a weathered and aged appearance. Alright, and with that, Episode 10 is finished. Alright, here we go. I've got a quick little setup here. I like these a lot. They work really well for adding some sight blocking for some kind of flat terrain. You can definitely use them to block off areas. They look really, really nice, and I'm looking forward to using them both in the sewers and in like a dungeon setting. So thank you everyone for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment down in that comment section, and we will see everyone next episode.